Didn't you hear when I just got finished saying how bad things were, and now you're telling me that you're going to raise up the Chaldeans against me? How could this be possible? Because, see, the Lord is now going to tell Habakkuk something he already knows, just how bad the Chaldeans are. Because in verse number 6, we learn that the Chaldeans are bitter and nasty. In verse number 7, they're terrible and dreadful. In verse number 8, their horses are swifter than the leopards, and they are more fierce than the evening wolves. And in verse 9, they're going to come with violence. In verse 10, they're going to scoff at your kings and your priests, and they're going to grind you to powder. Boy, I'll say the Chaldeans are really, really, really bad. Now this next verse is really interesting. Imagine if you're Habakkuk after you hear all this. And in verse number 12, basically, Habakkuk says to the Lord, "Are you crazy?" I mean, that's my interpretation. But this verse number 12 is actually probably one of the strongest verses in the Bible somebody has to say to the Lord, because what he says, "Art thou not everlasting?" In other words, Habakkuk is telling God, I thought you were the good guy. You know, you're the one that's everlasting. You're the one that's all merciful. And you're telling me in my condition, in the condition of my nation, that your answer is you're going to make things 100 times worse than what we're facing right now. And to his mind, that's crazy. And to our minds, it would be, that's really crazy. So in a nutshell, there's chapter 1 of Habakkuk. And we're thinking, what in the world does this mean? What does this mean for us today? So let's look at a couple of things to see if we can figure out how can we take this contemporary chapter from an Old Testament prophet and help tell us how we should be reacting today. Because it seems very real to us, doesn't it? In fact, there's many that would look out over our nation and say, it seems to me like the Chaldeans have already been released on us. A lot of people think that. But notice how Habakkuk reacts in this chapter. Many Christians would say the reason we are facing the problems we're facing today is because the church has been passive over the past 50-something years, right? Well, Habakkuk is anything but passive. In fact, you would say his attitude with the Lord is he's engaged with God. He is wrestling in prayer with God. You would say he's looking for a relationship that is bold and honest. He's being upfront with God. He's realizing God knows what he feels anyway, so why should he fake it? But he's being aggressive. And I think that's the way we should be also. Because it reminds me of the scripture in Hebrews. Hebrews 4:14 through 16. Seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly until the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. So there's Habakkuk. And there we should be. We should be coming boldly to God in prayer. We should want a bold and honest relationship with God because of what's facing us. And why can we be bold? It's because we're coming to the throne of grace. Aren't you glad that our salvation is not based on doing everything right? Yeah, we're going to say the wrong thing. But God's not going to smack us down for it, because it's the throne of grace that he's putting in front of us. Now the second thing is, after Habakkuk has been really upfront with God, the very next thing he says, "O Lord my God, my Holy One." And this is really important. He may be asking God tough questions. He may be a little overboard with his questions that he's asking God. But at least he's asking God questions. He has not abandoned God, has he? He knows that he's reached a point in his life and in the life of this nation that he can't figure out by himself. And instead of just throwing his hands up and say, God never answers my prayers and he doesn't give me what I want, I'll just go sit in a corner someplace. A lot of people do that, don't they? A lot of people do that. On the other hand, he says, I am engaged with God because God is God. Because I realize that all the time in my life, I'm going to be faced with situations and circumstances that there is no definitive answer to. I'm not going to know what's the right or what's the wrong. I'm going to have to do the best I can, but I depend on God. I'm not in it by myself. Whether I'm right or wrong is not going to be the end, because God is in it with me. And so often when I look at myself, when I look at my anger and frustration over situations and circumstances, it's because I can't figure out life by myself. I continue to get to the point where I know God is my life. And that drives my flesh crazy. Because see, we want to handle everything ourselves, don't we? We want to be able to work it all out. But it doesn't happen that way.